We are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not, because if we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland, and we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor.
What sounds like a dramatic plot from a Cold War thriller, the United States trying to lay claim to a massive Arctic island, is once again dominating global headlines. But what if the biggest land grab of the 21st century isn't about a country in crisis, but an icy island at the top of the world? U.S. President Donald Trump's push to acquire Greenland stunned allies, rattled Europe, and turned this remote Arctic territory into the center of a global power struggle.
I would like to make a deal, the easy way, but if we don't do it the easy way, we're going to do it the hard way.
Behind the jokes and headlines lies a serious story of military dominance, rare earth minerals, and control over future Arctic trade routes. Why does the U.S. really want Greenland? And why does it matter to the entire world? Let's break it down. The United States' interest in Greenland is not new, but its intensity and timing reflect shifting geopolitical priorities. Since the 19th century, the United States has made several attempts to acquire the island of Greenland from Denmark. There were notable internal discussions within the U.S. federal government about acquiring Greenland in 1867, 1910, 1946, 1955, 2019, and 2025. An acquisition has been advocated by American Secretaries of State William H. Seward and James F. Burns, privately by Vice President Nelson Rockefeller, and publicly by President Donald Trump, among others. Donald Trump first publicly floated the idea of buying Greenland from Denmark during his first term, describing it as a real estate deal. But the proposal was widely mocked and categorically rejected by both Danish and Greenlandic leaders. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen called it an absurd discussion and reiterated that Greenland was not for sale. After winning re-election in 2025, Trump revived this proposal. U.S. officials, including Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, hinted that the U.S. could assert more control over Greenland, even questioning Denmark's right to govern the territory, though they stopped short of explicitly confirming force.
So you can't take it off the table that the U.S. would use military force to seize Greenland?
The United States should have Greenland as part of the United States. There's no need to even think or talk about this in the context that you're asking of a military operation. Nobody's going to fight the United States militarily over the future.
In January 2025, Republican lawmakers circulated a draft version of the Make Greenland Great Again Act, which would authorize exploratory talks about purchasing the island. While discussions remained theoretical, interest was clearly elevated. Coming to 2026, in a dramatic escalation, Trump publicly stated that the U.S. would acquire Greenland, whether they like it or not, tying the push to national security concerns and suggesting the possibility of both financial incentives and military options.
I will say this about Greenland. We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you.
Reports even suggested that U.S. officials have discussed offering money to Greenland residents to entice acceptance. This renewed rhetoric followed a controversial U.S. military operation in Venezuela that resulted in the capture of President Nicolas Maduro, which Trump cited as part of a broader strategy to secure American interests globally, including control of resources and strategic locations. Greenland's history stretches back thousands of years. The island was inhabited intermittently by Inuit peoples from Asia and North America as early as 2500 BC. Around 985 AD, Vikings led by Eric the Red settled in southern Greenland, establishing farms and building churches. At the same time, ancestors of today's Inuit arrived, living as hunters and gatherers. Over the centuries, the Inuit became the dominant culture, gradually pushing out the Viking settlers by around 1400. Denmark formally colonized Greenland in the 18th century, starting in 1721 when missionary Hans Egede arrived, marking the beginning of the colonial era. A statue of Egede still stands on a hilltop overlooking Nuuk's colonial harbor, though many Greenlanders view it as a reminder of lost Inuit traditions. In 1916, the United States purchased the Danish West Indies, now the U.S. Virgin Islands, for $25 million in gold. As part of that treaty, Washington acknowledged Danish sovereignty over Greenland and stated it would not object to Denmark extending its political and economic influence over the entire island. Greenland's political status evolved over time. In 1953, it shifted from a colony to a formal territory under Denmark's constitution. Although Greenlanders were not consulted, and any potential sale would require a constitutional amendment. Since 2009, Greenland has been able to pursue independence through a self-rule process that requires both a referendum and Danish parliamentary approval. While Greenland enjoys extensive autonomy, foreign affairs and defense remain under Danish authority unless otherwise agreed. The island is home to roughly 57,000 people, with limited infrastructure and no roads connecting its approximately 17 towns. Relations between Denmark and Greenland have not always been smooth. In the 1950s, Danish authorities forcibly relocated Inuit communities to larger towns, marginalizing indigenous practices and languages. Denmark formally apologized in 2022 for a 1950s experiment that sent Greenlandic children to Denmark. Between 1966 and 1991, thousands of Greenlandic women and girls, some as young as 13, were fitted with intrauterine devices without consent. Denmark issued a formal apology for this decades-long birth control campaign in 2025. Greenland has also seen controversies over its natural resources. A 2025 documentary revealed that Denmark and private companies profited from Greenland's cryolite mine between 1853 and 1987 without benefiting local communities. Cryolite, which is essential in aluminum production, was mined from the world's largest deposit. On the international stage, Greenland joined the European community in 1973 through Denmark, but withdrew in 1985 after gaining home rule. Today it holds overseas country and territory status with the European Union, maintaining a special arrangement for fisheries. The United States has maintained a long-standing military presence on the island. Under a 1951 agreement, the U.S. established a permanent base at Pituffik in northwest Greenland, with Danish and Greenlandic notification. Denmark has historically supported this presence because it lacks the capability to independently defend Greenland and benefits from U.S. security guarantees through NATO. Trump's threats to seize Greenland have triggered a wave of European solidarity with Denmark, but the crisis has exposed an uncomfortable reality. Denmark is rallying support to protect a territory whose population wants independence and whose largest opposition party now wants to bypass Copenhagen and negotiate directly with Washington. Greenland is large, over 2.16 million square kilometers, but very sparsely populated, with around 56,000 people, mostly living along its western coast. It is also extraordinarily rich in mineral potential, particularly in resources the modern world prizes. According to Greenland's GEUS and the U.S. Geological Survey, Greenland ranks 8th in the world for rare earth element reserves, with an estimated 1.5 million tons, and hosts two of the planet's most important rare earth deposits, Kvanefjeld and Tonbris. While its economically recoverable rare earth reserves are estimated at around 1.5 million tons, its total geological potential could be as high as 36.1 billion tons. In addition, Greenland is believed to contain about 6 million tons of graphite, roughly 0.75% of global reserves, along with an estimated 235,000 tons of lithium, a critical resource as demand for electric vehicles, batteries, and renewable energy technologies continues to rise. Despite this extraordinary potential, commercial rare earth mining has not yet begun. Greenland's harsh Arctic environment remains a major obstacle. Only about 20% of the island is ice-free, and winter temperatures can drop below -40 degrees Celsius, making large-scale mining and transport extremely difficult. However, climate change is gradually reshaping these constraints. As ice caps retreat, new mineral zones and shipping routes are opening, increasing the feasibility of mining and positioning Greenland as a potential future hub for critical minerals. Beyond rare earths, Greenland is exceptionally resource-rich. It contains 25 of the more than 30 materials classified as critical by the European Union, including minerals essential for electric vehicles, wind turbines, high-tech electronics, and defense systems. The island also hosts deposits of iron ore, graphite, zinc, gold, uranium, copper, and titanium vanadium, along with significant offshore oil and gas potential. Collectively, these resources make Greenland one of the most strategically important untapped mineral frontiers in the world, and a major reason why global powers, especially the United States, are increasingly focused on its future. Greenland may also hold large hydrocarbon deposits. Estimates suggest the island could contain hydrocarbon reserves roughly equivalent to 28 to 31 billion barrels of oil, though significant exploration and development has not occurred. Global rare earth supply is dominated by China, which controls more than 90% of rare earth processing and a very high percentage of global output. That control gives China outsized leverage in tech and defense supply chains, which the US and allies want to reduce. Greenland's reserves offer a potential alternative source if viable extraction and processing infrastructure can be developed. Despite this potential, ongoing mining in Greenland has been limited by harsh climate, a lack of infrastructure, and strong local and environmental opposition. Greenland's geography makes it uniquely strategic. It sits directly between North America and Europe, largely above the Arctic Circle. As Arctic ice melts, previously inaccessible sea routes and shipping lanes are opening up, shortening connections between Pacific and Atlantic trade. Greenland serves as a gateway for monitoring naval and submarine activity, especially through the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap, a crucial Cold War and modern surveillance corridor. The island hosts the U.S. Patuxent Space Base, formerly Thule Air Base, a key component of early warning systems for ballistic missile detection and global defense monitoring. Trump's justification for acquiring Greenland focuses heavily on national security. The idea that control of this Arctic island would help the U.S. deter Russian and Chinese influence and allow Washington to dominate regional security architecture. However, Nordic diplomats have publicly challenged claims of heavy Chinese or Russian military presence around Greenland, describing such assertions as exaggerated or inaccurate. In the first week of 2026, following a U.S. military operation that led to the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, Trump publicly connected that event to broader efforts to secure American interests abroad, seemingly equating geopolitical intervention with territorial acquisition. This comparison drew sharp international criticism. Venezuela's situation, widely viewed by many nations as a violation of sovereignty, prompted condemnation from the United Nations and global leaders. Trump's remarks suggested a willingness to use force or coercion to achieve American strategic aims, including in Greenland, a NATO-allied territory. Historically, nations have sometimes purchased territory rather than conquering it. The most famous U.S. example is the 1867 purchase of Alaska from Russia for $7.2 million, negotiated by Secretary of State William H. Seward. That transaction was later dubbed Seward's Folly before Alaska's value became clear. In 1946, U.S. President Harry S. Truman offered Denmark $100 million in gold for Greenland as part of early Cold War defense strategy, but Denmark rejected the proposal. During the revived 2019 and 2026 discussions, Trump suggested that the U.S. might offer financial incentives directly to Greenland residents or provide subsidy sweeteners, up to $100,000 per person according to some reports, to offset resistance. Trump's aggressive comments about acquiring Greenland have sparked broad diplomatic pushback, particularly from Denmark, Greenland's governing country, and the broader European Union. Denmark has been clear and forceful in its rejection. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen warned that any U.S. attempt to take Greenland by force could destroy NATO, noting that Greenland's security and sovereignty are covered under the alliance. Greenland's own leadership has echoed this sentiment. Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen strongly rejected U.S. pressure, calling Trump's remarks disrespectful and emphasizing that Greenlanders want autonomy and their future determined by themselves, not external powers. In January 2025, and again in 2026, all 5 political parties in Greenland issued a joint statement saying, "We do not want to be Americans. We want to be Greenlanders," reaffirming their desire for self-determination and rejecting foreign takeover. European allies have also spoken out. Leaders from France, Germany, the UK, and other NATO members have expressed solidarity with Denmark, stressing that the Arctic's security should be managed cooperatively among allies rather than through unilateral seizure or acquisition. Trump has repeatedly framed Greenland as a national security priority. Strategically, the shortest route from Europe to North America passes over Greenland, making it crucial for the U.S. ballistic missile early warning system. In fact, Greenland's capital, Nuuk, is geographically closer to New York than to Copenhagen. The island sits at a geopolitical crossroads amid increasing Arctic militarization by NATO, Russia, and China. The United States sees Greenland as a key location to expand its military footprint, including deploying radars to monitor waters used by Russian vessels and submarines. One option reportedly discussed by White House officials is paying Greenland's nearly 56,000 residents between $10,000 and $100,000 each, potentially totaling $5.6 billion, to influence a secession vote and bring the island under U.S. influence. Greenlanders themselves are divided. Polls indicate that a majority support independence in principle, but many caution against moving too quickly, given the island's economic reliance on Denmark and the potential risks of overexposure to the United States. According to surveys, around 85% of Greenlanders oppose becoming part of the U.S., a statistic that highlights the gap between Washington's ambitions and local sentiment. Fishing accounts for over 90% of Greenland's exports, and Danish subsidies cover roughly half of the public budget, funding hospitals, schools, and critical infrastructure across the vast, sparsely populated territory. The U.S. already has a strong military presence at the Pituffik Space Base under a 1951 agreement. If Greenland were to pursue independence, it could potentially enter a compact of free association with the United States, similar to agreements the U.S. has with Micronesia, Palau, and the Marshall Islands. These agreements typically provide U.S. services and military protection in exchange for defense access. However, whether Greenland would fully benefit from such an arrangement depends on the scale of support and the pace at which the island diversifies its economy beyond fishing. Trump's push to capture Greenland is rooted in a mix of strategic calculation, resource competition, and geopolitical signaling. However, Greenland's future, as its leaders have repeatedly said, should be determined by Greenlanders themselves, not through coercion, ultimatums, or geopolitical grandstanding. Greenland is more than ice and snow. It's a high-stakes battleground of resources, military strategy, and global influence. And if you want to stay updated on how this Arctic chessboard shapes the future of world power, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you never miss our deep dives into the stories that matter.